So one of the first things to talk about is really the four types of data analysis. And I think usually these four types, they actually build upon each other, and we'll get to each of them. But the first one is the most simple, and it's called descriptive analysis. And so this is the W's. So if you think about who, what, why, when, these are just the basic descriptions of the information that you have. It's not really looking any deeper into it. So if you could look at your statistics about like your service data for child protection, right? You can say who is accessing our services, when are they coming, or more people coming at this time of year or this time of year. What are they reporting? What are the needs? This is really the first step. Obviously, it's great to go into data analysis with an idea of what you're looking for, but also sometimes when we get asked those questions, such as, I need a briefing on child protection in this operation. So really starting just to think through kind of some of these basic descriptives can really give you then a place to be like, oh, that's kind of weird. I wouldn't expect that. And then you start to build on it and you can move then to the next step or next type of analysis, which is explanatory. Explanatory is really where you're connecting the dots. So instead of just saying, oh, 50% of the children who reported were male, 50% were female, we're going to start then thinking about what does that mean? Is there a link between this and something else? If we were looking at, instead of just like age or sex or type, maybe we look at seeing like maybe in this location we're seeing more of this type of violence, and in this location we're seeing more of this type of violence. So we start linking the actual data points together instead of just thinking of them as their own independent piece of information. This can help you then to think through kind of cause and effect. So if in December we had very few incidents of GBV, there was a massive influx of people due to fighting. And then the next month we had a lot more cases of GBV. Obviously, you're going to have to follow up, but I mean, you might be able to say, potentially there is a connection between the number of cases and the new change in context. This is usually most reporting that you'll see starts out a little bit with the descriptive and then gets more into this explanatory. So this is just then where we say why we think things that are happening are happening. It's still data driven, but it moves more towards like conceptual. So basically the first type, descriptive, I could do for any country, right? Or any operation without knowing specifically your operation. But once you even get to the next type, explanatory, it really, really requires that we have individuals who understand what's going on and what's happening to then be able to try to say, oh, that could be because of this. Again, it's still possible to do it a little bit without a clear understanding. If you understand the topic, like child protection or GBV, very well, you might have enough experience to be able to infer some things, but it's really the people on the ground that will have the best. I'm going to show two graphs, and we're really just looking at the descriptive. So we're looking at descriptive analysis of this. So if I was to say who's coming to our services, you'd say mostly adults. Obviously, there are others. Also, we got Koki saying physical abuse is the most frequent type of violence that we're seeing here. So what you just told me, that who, so adults, we're talking about the what physical abuse. And this is information that is useful and necessary, but it's really, your graphs are going to speak for themselves on this. It's the next stuff that's really going to tell people anything. It's what donors want to know. It's what you want to know, because it's what's going to really inform your programming. Is like, could you, the next level, so that explanatory. So if I was going to give an example of this for explanatory, even though I don't know this context, is I could say it's likely that because you have adults and a lot of physical abuse, you're probably going to be, if you were to look a little deeper into this, you'd probably see there would be a lot of physical or intimate partner violence maybe that's influencing why you're seeing the population you're seeing and the type of violence you're seeing. That would be that next level where you're trying to link the two together. Again, this is just you looking at information and saying that could be the reason why, maybe this or maybe this. There's more work to be done, but it's kind of where you start linking up these two data points to see kind of what we're looking at. So then the next type is interpretive. So again, now we're getting even more. And so this is like kind of how you would, as you present a report or something, you would start out with those basics. You kind of talk about, well, this would probably be this, and then you start to interpret your information. This requires somebody who understands both the topic that you're reporting on and really the context you're working in. I know this is happening even more and more as we have data port in this, that we have IMOs or we have DEMAs helping us generate graphs and that sort of stuff. And that's totally okay. I mean, I think that's definitely a good support mechanism. But this is where it gets away from their ability to do, like, this is where we all have to, as subject matter experts, have to step in and actually then take those graphs and look beyond that to then what we know. So what are we anecdotally hearing from people in the community? What do we know from our coordination? What are the 5 Ws? This is where we draw in secondary data and we say, okay, this is telling us this. And we then also have seen this with other things, and you start to really kind of paint a broader picture. So it's moving beyond the data to contextualize. And then you also would say, so let's say you're finding something, right, in your data. This is where you would start to be like, does this actually make sense? Do you feel like there could be errors in your data, or do you think that this is actually plausible? And then here as well, you would explain limitations to the analysis. So again, our ability to say, without doing like concrete research study where there's that extensive controlling and that sort of stuff, you're not going to be able to say this is caused by this. We can really triangulate our data together and kind of think, but you also, when your interpretive analysis, you're also going to explain what are the limitations to your analysis. Is it possible that are there other explanations as well that could possibly be there, or what is still to be found out? And so finally, the last part about this interpretive is this requires you to draw a conclusion. So you ask, like, so what? So what does this mean? So what do we need to do? So it's really from this that we draw our recommendations or our asks or that. So what does this mean? What do we need to do? What are we going to do? Most of the time, for a lot of your analysis, really it's these first 3 types. So the descriptive, the explanatory, and then the interpretive that is really most of the time where we get at with the type of data that we have. Now, if you are an IMO or you are doing more advanced analysis as part of your work, then definitely you can probably get into this 4th type, which is forecast analysis. But this identifies the likelihood of future outcomes and trends at a specific time based upon current and historical data. This definitely doesn't mean that we can't do it. And I think we do this. So if you think about your programming and you know that the last 3 years we've seen a spike around this time of year in terms of FGM, or we've seen around the holidays, we see an increase of this type of violence, or that we know when we see this type of movement that we can expect the rates of separated children will increase. This is forecast analysis. Based upon what we've seen in the past, this is what we would assume we would see in the future data. And again, there is predictive analysis, which is the very advanced version of this, but with the type of data that we'll be working with most of the time, we can do this, but it will require that triangulation, basically knowing with reports, with our data, with your experience, kind of what you would expect to see. And this, again, requires a high level of understanding of the context and also the subject matter. So it's taking basically what you think is, or what you're currently seeing, and broadcasting that to future outcomes.